Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. So, Cyberjar is indeed back. So this deck is basically going to be revolved around this card. However, this is kind of like an introduction to the deck, as well as kind of like a early preview of something that I'm working on. So the original idea is to basically take out what would be an empty jar engine and throw in Cyberjar, giving us access to potentially just at any point regecking our opponent's board, which technically is more like Dark Hole because it destroys everything, but then potentially going into Morphing Jar, or we can go into Morphing Jar number 2 into Cyberjar, basically allowing us to kind of have a deck out as a win condition. So the deck, honestly, at its earlier stages, as I was building it, it's really difficult to pull off FTKs this day and age, especially when you are going second. You can even droplets for like AD changer to try to help out with certain FTK plays, but a lot of decks will have some negations. I mean, Cyberjar and Morphing Jar are some of the most powerful cards in the game to kind of come back from an insane loss. The deck actually has a pretty good matchup against TR elements because they are going to be starting to send a bunch of cards over to the graveyard. A lot of the duels, honestly, are just going to end with someone like leaving in terms of like timeouts or like whatever the case may be. I actually ran out of time over here in this play here. There's one card that I do want to talk about called Reverse Reuse, which I haven't actually heard that many people talking about, even like since like the time of the Dawn Yu-Gi-Oh. I haven't really heard anyone using this card, but what the initial plan was is to use Reverse Reuse on our opponent, giving them 2 flip effect monsters. And what's interesting with the Morphing Jar number 2, you actually get to benefit off of the monster. They get nothing off of Reverse Reuse if it's your card that would flip and shuffle it back into the deck. So what this card is, it's a trap card that makes it so you target up to 2 flip effect monsters in your graveyard. You summon them to your opponent's side of the field. The original core idea of this deck, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about it, and I'll give you guys more like gameplay here in a second. But the original idea of this, there's actually another build that I do want to show off. The original idea was to not play Mystic Mine. Obviously, yes, Mystic Mine would be great in the deck because it's at the end of the day a deck that is revolved around Deckout. If you're wondering why there are 2 upstarts, originally it's supposed to play 1 day at peace, and 1 day at peace could not be activated, so I did put 2 upstarts in it as just kind of a placeholder because this didn't work against the AI if you were to like do a test hand over here. Right, but the whole goal is basically to try to get as many effects of the Cyberjar or Morphing Jar, because it's deck out. That's the goal of it. This is kind of like an early introduction to the deck. I mean, I could just play it out right here by just going with this card over here, and you just instantly can activate Book of Taiyu. My opponent does need to exist, so again, Dark Hole dealings and certain cards won't work with testing this out in terms of the FTK, so there were some placeholder cards, but the whole idea is to Morphing Jar and hopefully go into Cyberjar or whatever the case may be. Now, unfortunately, we have an AD changer over here, so it can just stall, but the idea is to use hand destruction, Dark Hole dealings. Again, if there's no opponent there, you cannot activate anything, but I do want to go ahead and talk a little bit about it. So, the few new cards that I want to talk about, and like I said, no Mystic Mine here in the deck, although it would be a great addition to it. The goal is to hand destruction and or, again, Dark Hole dealings, do whatever card destruction, get these cards into the graveyard. Even if they negate and destroy Cyberjar, my goal is to give them Cyberjar, Morphing Jar number 2, and then I can use Sol and Luna, or I can use cards like the Book of Eclipse to go ahead and force those flip effects on my opponent, giving myself a huge advantage. Cyberjar is one of the most OP cards, that and Fiberjar, to like reset the entire duel, basically giving the player maybe with a disadvantage to the point where they have like a huge chance to come back into the game. Same thing with Morphing Jar number 2. This card is like one of those cards where as huge contender to be like a a loop oriented card. There are loops with Morphing Jar number 2 which are interesting that can cause really dumb game states. But the whole goal is basically to flip up like Cyberjar, Morphing Jar, and just get a bunch of advantage and stall out your opponent. There's a few different like things that I want to show off. There's actually a runic build that my homie Quest Train sent, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys some other like gameplay of it because this is a deck that's kind of a work in progress. There's also a build that I was theorizing, which is all about the Prediction Princesses. Now, unfortunately, with the Prediction Princess stuff, your opponent knows exactly what you're going to be putting down, right? And that's kind of the unfortunate part with it. But also with Cyberjar, when you flip it up, you'd be destroying your own cards, because that's just how it works. It destroys all monsters on the field, not just your opponents. But that would reveal what you are actually playing. And I think the goal of this deck is to not reveal what you're playing. But nowadays in Yu-Gi-Oh, if you start setting a card face down, they kind of expect certain things. Now this is a really cool build using the Runic engine because, again, it's a Deckout deck. Runic Mystic Mine, I think, will be an actual deck that people will be taking into, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh. Mystic Mine in general, not being on the ban list, is going to definitely be a huge problem, I think, for a lot of different decks. And so, potentially, a lot more people will be running some, like, back row destruction. But Morphing Jar and Cyber Jar, I mean, this is a 60 card deck over here. I'll give you guys the deck profile for this one as well. Where's that little Cyber Jar guy? Oh, he's in here somewhere. Anyways, Cyber Jar, again, you guys saw it from the first duel. It's got a really good TR Elements matchup, and that other one was like basically done. It was just the timer ran out. A lot of times you'll see when you start going off with Morphing Jar and then you start using Book of Eclipse, Book of Taiyu, what happens is your opponent will quit on you. It's normal though. This is almost like Royal Magical Library. These things, a lot of people just don't want to play against it, and that's why I was kind of more so practicing against like the AI to see how consistent is it. Honestly, it's not going to be like a really high chance to pull it off. One, if you get hand trapped once, it's just so devastating. Like, the deck cannot play around hand traps in the current state of the game. However, the goal was, and again, this was an issue where the guy just GG's out. Again, a lot of these will just be like GG's out over here. But everyone is really playing the Kashtira's. These Kashtira's are probably one of the most threatening decks to actually come out into the game, and that's simply due to how good it is. A lot of people are actually putting in Morphing and Cyber Jar into their decks as well. I don't know why Cyber Jar coming back is making people play Morphing Jar, but it definitely is. I've noticed that a lot of people are just trying it out. It's a new card, right? Cyber Jar is one of the most powerful Yu-Gi-Oh cards of all time in terms of flip effects. To have that insane amount of potential come back, because again, it destroys all cards, and then the 4 lower are all summoned, and then all the rest of the cards you get to add to your hand. It's a real good reset, but setting Cyber Jar past is usually not the best option because your opponent won't just attack right into it. He just surrenders. He's like, I don't want any of this. He activates this. He's got this. He's got this. Yeah, Question just taking the dub over here. Again, the deck is pretty fast, but it's not like FTK. Well, my variant, I tried to make it more FTK oriented. There's threatening roars in this one. I think nowadays it is harder to stall with, like, back in the day when people would play like Wave Motion Cannon or let's say like Final Countdown, which is also at 1. You could probably throw those in here, but I just kind of want to talk a little bit more about this deck. So my goal originally, I'm going to move these cards out of the way. My goal originally with this deck, it was to get Cyber Jar and Morphing Jar number 2 into the graveyard. Actually, you'll see there's a Foolish Burial over here. The goal was to actually give this to our opponent, and then we would flip up like Book of Eclipse. Now, unfortunately, the problem with this card is it has to be during the end phase. You get to change all of them. A lot of times what will happen is your opponent will either like tribute summon, so like the cards are gone, or they will just use it as material for other things if they are flipped face up. However, usually if they are flipped face up and your opponent's turn, if you don't have something to stall to prevent yourselves from getting OTK'd, a lot of times you just get OTK'd anyways. So there is a kind of a double-edged sword when you just like give your opponent Morphing Jar and it's their turn, and your whole entire play was like, let's say, normal summon Spirit of the Fall Wind, which is a really excellent card, by the way. I didn't get to talk about this because this is like a deck in progress, so feel free to let me know what other great cards could exist in here. Like I said, I'm sorry here. We should be only playing 1 copy of it, but we can also play 3 copies of Dark World Dealings. That's actually a really important card here. The reason why it's really important is because you want to go ahead and normal summon your Spirit of the Fall Wind. Unfortunately, this does reveal what you're playing, and if this gets Veilered, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. You can like run Book of Moon to flip it face down, but for the most part, it does really hurt when you get hand trapped by your opponent. So the goal was to either search out Cyber Jar, Morphing Jar, and then use cards like Hand Destruction or Dark World Dealings. Use those, get it into the graveyard, and then be able to just give your opponent basically these 2 cards. Then since this card will be face up, you do need something face down. So how this card works is you give your opponent 2 monsters that are flip effects, and it gives it to your opponent's board. We'll talk more about the Prediction Princess in maybe another one, because it's kind of like my early testing, and I kind of want some feedback for this deck. So over here, we will then also follow up with Solid Luna. So what this does is you target 1 monster you control and 1 monster your opponent controls. You apply the following effect on each monster depending on its battle position. So You flip one monster face down, that's face up, and you flip one monster that's face down, face up. You can only activate one per turn, so basically it lets you block with your Spirit of the Fall Wind. The stats are okay on it though. It's got 1800 attack, but it allows you to have a monster, because you have to have a monster to be able to use this effect. Alternatively, what I've been also doing, I probably have some gameplay of it, but it might take a while to go sift through it, but I can explain it real quick. I set my Cyber Jar turn 1, and then I also set Sol and Luna. When my opponent starts comboing off at the very right moment, I will activate Sol and Luna. I get to basically flip one of their monsters face down. There's a couple duels that I did have where my opponent would have something that would like negate the effects of like monsters, and what I did was I flipped that monster face down, and then I flipped my Cyber Jar face up, then I popped everything. So there are really cool plays with Cyber Jar that aren't just about like deck out. Like there are ways to utilize this card in like a kind of more big brain move. I think this card is pretty cool at the end of the day. I was thinking about other cards that would search it out. There's a lot of cards that are just too slow. Like there's like, I think there was a Tindangle like flip effect. It's too slow to dump these cards in the graveyard. The Prediction Princess stuff will probably be faster and maybe a more viable way to play, but I don't know if that deck would necessarily be able to FTK it quite that fast, as it does need a lot of cards to search out, then you have to set it, and then you have the quick effect. That is something that I will consider trying out. But yeah, AD Changer is great just to flip your monsters. Great for that effect. Like I said, there's a Runic build. That was the one that you guys did see some gameplay of. Courtesy of my homie Questrain over here. So he's playing like almost a 60 card variant over here. You've got the Cyber Stein, but this can be good for Deckout as well. I've also seen a lot more Trick Stars because obviously we got I think it was the Light Stage. We got a new change on the ban list for them as well. So a lot of people are trying out like Trick Stars in with Cyber Jar, obviously, because like if they get a bunch of monsters, you know, and they pop everything and they have the field spell, you can actually get burnt out pretty fast with the deck. But in terms of like you know, I'll mouse over the cards. It's not necessarily going to be like a deck profile that I would say is like automatically both of these, by the way. This one's from my homie Questrain over here. Like these, Lava Golem will help you out with turn 1 plays when you are going second, because going second when you're playing like an empty jar, it's so rough in 2022. Like a lot of times you will just get negated for days. But I think Lava Golem would be good. I was also at one point playing Droplets, which was a card was considered. I think if you want to make this deck competitive, like if you do want to try to take the deck seriously, you gotta play Mystic Mind. You gotta play the quick play that when your opponent special summons, you get to activate Mystic Mind from the deck. You gotta play all of those cards, and I just don't really want to play mine. And that's kind of, I guess, where I draw the line in terms of like having fun with this deck. But I will try the Prediction Princess build, but it's again more of a progress deck. But let me know what you guys would add with this deck, if you guys were to add anything. But yeah, Cyber Jar coming back into the game is pretty big for certain decks, but at the end of the day, it's probably going to be cheesy more than like competitive, great, like, you know, consistent FTKs because of hand traps just existing in the game. And on top of that, most decks in this day and age probably will have some sort of disruption and negation against like face down. They'll just pop it face down. Again, you do happen to have the Sol and Luna, but there's so many other cards that are just more like meta and much more consistent and fast. But anyways, that's my thoughts on brand new Cyber Jar. Like I say, it's like a work in progress deck. So let me know your thoughts down below. But thanks for tuning in, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you want to update to this build, I will probably try out the Prediction Princess stuff, or maybe we'll make some modifications based on your guys' feedback. So if you guys want to see an update to this build, subscribe, turn that bell if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Peace.